Yo people, welcome back to another video. Now we've seen Bron Breakker has aligned himself to Seth Rollins as a Paul Heyman guy, and many people are already comparing this faction to Evolution, which I'd say is pretty accurate at the moment, but if that's the case, we're still missing one more person to take this role. I theorized for a month or so that Seth Rollins would turn heel with the help of Paul Heyman, and he would join this team led by the final boss, which would have John Cena and Seth Rollins, therefore giving The Rock control of the WWE champion, and he'd make Seth start a pursuit at some point for the World Heavyweight Championship, so that the final boss could control both champions. I did think maybe we could get more members because, as I've been saying, this build up and all of this should be leading to the main event of WrestleMania 42, which Paul Heyman did state on Monday, by the way. However, it's not clear at the moment if that is all leading up to The Rock versus Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. We know Roman will have to build his own team, which could involve people like Cody Rhodes and CM Punk, and it would make sense if it were for an eventual endgame of The Rock versus Roman Reigns. But I think WWE just doesn't want to commit to anything right now in case The Rock leaves them high and dry. Storyline wise, the fact that Paul Heyman went out of his way to help Seth Rollins, I would have 100% thought that those were the instructions from The Rock, who is the High Chief of the Bloodline, so his orders are more important than Roman Reigns' orders. However, at the moment, it just looks like it's Seth told him to do it, Seth told him to join him, and he did it, which is less impactful, and I don't know if I buy that, to be honest, which is why I'd like to think that the final boss is behind this whole heel faction that is about to begin. Now, as for the people comparing it to Evolution, I think what they see, or at least how I interpret this, would be The Rock would be the equivalent of Ric Flair, Seth Rollins is Triple H, Bron Breakker would be Batista, which means we're missing the Randy Orton and potentially a female if they wish to do so and kind of freshen things up. For me, I think that Bron Breakker is a good choice because WWE needs to start getting young talent and developing them to a top main event level through convincing and earned storylines. So all round, I think this was a great decision. However, who is the Randy Orton equivalent of this group? Who could it be? Personally, I don't think we'll find out straight away. I think they're going to let Bron Breakker and Seth do some work together, see how that goes, and then at some pay-per-view, they'll probably give us the answer of who that missing member is. Now, I'm going to give you different options of who could join, and also it's important to remember that the drafts are very soon. I think they're like a month or so away. So if someone is on SmackDown, obviously it would mean that I think they get drafted onto Raw. Ideally, the person who should take this quote-unquote Randy Orton equivalent should be someone who is currently overlooked, not well booked, or a future star. So my number one choice would be Carmelo Hayes. In my opinion, he is the best talent out of all those NXT graduates that we got last year that moved on to the main roster, which includes Bron Breakker, Tiffany Stratton, Lyra Valkyria, and out of those names, he's conveniently the only one that hasn't won a championship, which only intensifies those Triple H racism allegations. Only last week did they finally let him win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale, but for me, he should be chasing the gold already. If everyone else has championship gold, he should at least be chasing one of them, and I think he is going to in that new team that he's going to be in with The Miz. Of course, this is still good, but they're doing that long-term developing him, making sure everything's right, and he's going to really have a lot of patience and really grind to get to the top. And because of this alliance with The Miz, it makes his chances very, very unlikely of joining this Seth Rollins team. But again, it shows how this quote-unquote long-term booking from Triple H is an absolute myth. If this long-term booking did exist, then Melo would already be built up with momentum, and also he'd already be a solo star instead of being pushed into the tag team division with The Miz. They can still find a way to swerve the whole Miz thing, but I don't know, it would seem too forced at this point, especially because The Miz helped Carmelo win that Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale. However, if I was booking it, I think Seth Rollins, Bron Breakker and Carmelo Hayes would be an insane group to have. And if they were all led by The Rock as the kind of Ric Flair Evolution type of role, then that would be perfect. Melo and Bron learning the heel ways from Seth Rollins and The Rock, while Paul Heyman helps them out with everything else that they need, whether it's personal stuff, backstage stuff, and just gain a lot of experience from a guy who's been in the business for over 30 years. Next up is someone like Austin Theory. Now, this is a Vince McMahon guy, and he's been trolled for it for years, especially with the whole Vince speculation, allegation, whatever Asian that has happened with him. His stocks are at an all-time low right now, and I think they can still bring him back to relevance and bring him back to some sort of rebuild, but it will take a long time in my opinion, especially if I think his last match on TV, his last solo match, was getting squashed in 3 minutes by Jey Uso. I personally think he has the talent and he has everything he needs to get to that level. But personally, for me, he's just not someone that I've really cared about, especially after Cena buried him with his promos. And I don't know, like I said, they'd have to do a massive rebuild on this guy. And I'm just not sure in the long run if he has that presence and that star power to be a consistent main event level guy compared to someone like Carmelo Hayes or some of the names I'm going to mention now. My next option is Drew McIntyre, and I think he would be a solid name. Yes, he has some tension with Seth Rollins. However, I think they've always had some sort of respect for each other. They've never reached those CM Punk and Drew McIntyre levels or those Damian Priest and Drew McIntyre levels of hatred. Also, if this team was ultimately led by The Rock, then I think it would be a good addition storyline wise, because Drew McIntyre had his whole Bloodline feud not that long ago where he was chasing down Bloodline members and nothing really ever happened with that. I do believe if they'd have kept with that chasing the Bloodline thing, it would have led to an eventual match versus Roman Reigns, which I think if they do this whole Drew McIntyre as the next member, they could actually reconstruct this feud going forwards. But my only concern is that if Drew McIntyre's in this group, Seth Rollins wouldn't feel like the flat out leader. It would feel like a sort of Leonardo and Raphael dynamic. And also another important thing, Drew McIntyre is 39 years old compared to someone like Carmelo Hayes, who is 30 years old, and Austin Theory, who is only 27 years old. Another option, and the next three are going to be pretty similar, but the first one of the three is Jey Uso. Now, the reason I don't think it will be him is mainly because he's holding the belt that I think Seth will end up with. So it wouldn't make any sense personally to just make him either bend over and lose the belt and just join the team. It just wouldn't make sense. However, I would like to see Jey Uso turn heel. There is some sort of way in which they could make all these things happen, but I just don't see it. They do have that good connection with The Rock storyline wise. Paul Heyman could persuade him in the name of family, and he can tell Jey if he joins, he can be the real tribal chief, and would become so by taking out Roman Reigns, etc. The only issue with him, again, is his age. He's 39. Also, Jimmy, what would happen with him? Does he automatically get involved, or does he reject and he goes against Jey again, which personally I don't want to see. I'd rather they give the spot to someone who's younger, and it would be more impactful, which is why my next option is Jacob Fatu. I personally think that Jacob Fatu would be good for this group because he again can connect to The Rock with the whole bloodline stuff. If he is the OG of this team, Jacob is very over right now as well, and he does possess the US title, which is the perfect mid-card title that I think Bron Breakker or the new member, assuming it's not Jacob Fatu, will try to go after. So why not put one of the actual champions already in place and defend it with the help of Bron Breakker and all the other teammates. We also know there's a bit of tension between Jacob and Solo. Jacob is most likely going to leave Solo, or Solo betrays him. I'd rather it be Jacob betraying Solo, and he could use this group as a reason to betray Solo and leave him behind. He's pushing on to bigger things. This bloodline version with Solo isn't working no more, so he leaves him. I think they can tie it all up pretty well, and this could also allow us in the long run to maybe see Jacob Fatu versus Roman Reigns. It would also allow Solo to become a face for once in this main roster because he's always been a heel since he debuted, and he would get a rebrand and maybe he could start pushing for bigger things as a face because this whole heel thing has fizzled out for Solo Sikoa. However, my next option is actually Solo Sikoa, assuming there could be some sort of rebrand where he becomes a face and he does well. But literally, this whole situation would be the vice versa of what I just explained with Jacob, except in this case, Solo wouldn't have the belt. Although, if they do plan on doing this long game and not announce the next member for a while, I think it's possible where Solo could turn heel on Jacob Fatu, and when he explains why he did, he could say that winning that US championship was his way of proving to Seth Rollins and the others that he is worthy of joining. This would also allow us to see Solo in a better light in terms of being a heel than that whole imposter tribal chief gimmick, which he kind of made it work but just took too many L's and got to the tribal chief position off the back of too many L's. So all round he never really felt like a threat. However, if he did betray Jacob, then we could potentially see Jacob team up with Roman Reigns, for example. So there's a lot of possibilities still available if they do go for all these options, and there's a lot of different events that could happen potentially, which is all very interesting. Now, in the rare possibility that we have a female representative, not as the Randy Orton replacement, just in terms of an extra member that is female, then straight away an option has to be Becky Lynch. That is Seth's wife, so it's an easy way to plot this into the whole storyline. She also turned heel on Monday, and I think I'd want to see a female just in general being in this faction, so that Roman's team could also generate a female that needs this push, and we could get a good female feud that doesn't involve any of the belts. However, for me personally, I wouldn't want to see Becky, as I'm not a fan of this whole real life relationship and storylines thing, but it could be one of those things that other people want to see, and it makes sense. I understand why you'd want to see it, but for me personally, again, I think we already have one of these relationship dynamics with Dominic Mysterio and Liv Morgan, so again, I don't think they're going to repeat it, and that's why I don't think it will be Becky, unless they don't do the whole lovey relationship thing, which is kind of cringe for me. Next up is someone like Bayley, and I think she's due a heel run again, and what a better time to do it than when you've just been chucked out of WrestleMania, and this is your chance to get payback in general on the entire locker room, on the entire women's division, by aligning yourself with the strongest new group that is around. Unfortunately, because of how nice she is, she's actually kind of become like the forgotten horsewoman, and she doesn't do the whole politics and attention seeking that Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch do, so it does cost her in terms of image and legacy. So this would actually be a legit reason for it to be her time to shine and give us maybe a more ruthless version of Bayley and get a well established, or just overall get a well established female wrestler into this faction. If it's not Bayley, then it can be someone else. Another example of an established female fighter, by the way, that Triple H loves, so don't be surprised if this was to be a female inclusion, is someone like Nia Jax. She would just suit this, and she's usually a heel, she's usually a threat by herself, she doesn't need a babysitter or anything, so she can just do her own work, bring back the success to the group, and everyone thrives. So I see how this could easily work, and Triple H being a fan of Nia Jax, clearly, just don't be surprised if something like this was to happen. Another choice is someone like Roxanne Perez, who is dubbed as the prodigy, and with all the young talent that will benefit from just being in this group, and they can all learn off of each other and experience everything together, I think it would suit someone like her. She's already a heel. It would be cool in my opinion to see a Paul Heyman woman, so she could definitely fit the bill. She's kind of still flirting with NXT and the main roster. She hasn't made that full push, even though we saw her at stuff like Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber. But I think it suits her perfectly even more for that reason, because she doesn't need to build her status and go directly for a title, because this group is the insurance policy that she will still get weekly screen time, and she gets developed enough while she's only, what, like 23 years old? So I think she would be a great person to add in terms of her age, in terms of what she can achieve, the potential, all of that stuff. For me personally, I think someone like Raquel Rodriguez would actually suit this group dynamic a lot. Plus, she's got the powerhouse build, but she's doing alright with the Judgment Day and Liv Morgan, so of course she's already taken. I don't think she'd ever get chosen. Another person that I think would have suited this really well is someone like Jade Cargill, but again, they're about to unleash her solo main event run, so it wouldn't make sense to just add her into this group, especially if this female member is someone that wouldn't particularly go for one of the main belts, not straight away at least. But yeah, if there's anyone else that I've missed out or that you want to see in particular, feel free to let me know down below in the comments. Let me know who your top male and female choices would be for this new faction, or if you think that the story is going down a completely different route. I'd appreciate if you could also leave a like on the video and sub to the channel. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.